on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and we are chasing the Reading and Northern 2102 here on the Pittston excursion today. The train's traveling between Nesquehoning and Pittston Station, and I'm out here with my buddy Chris and his brother, and we are flying the rails today. Having some fun, getting some shots of her rolling up the grade. It's all fun out here. So with that being said, let's see what we can get out here today on the road of Anthracite.
The thrill of chasing the Iron Horse Rambles has returned to the channel, and we're starting off by chasing the 2025 Pittston excursion between Nesquehoning and Wilkes-Barre and Scranton stations on the Lehigh Division. As always, sitting posed at the head end of the consist, Reading and Northern's T1 number 2102 would be hauling the train today, making loads of noise and providing a spectacle done by the Reading and Northern steam crew. The 1945 built 484 would be traveling former sections of the Lehigh Valley and Central Railroad of New Jersey between Nesquehoning and Pittston. Sat behind the T1 are 14 loaded passenger cars, as the train had been sold out, which isn't terribly much weight, but still gives it enough to haul to make some good sound. A cool aspect for being in Nesquehoning this morning was Reading and Northern posed this 1950 Mack fire truck next to the 2102, which for those photographers in the area made for some great side-by-side pictures. And of course the funny contrast being that one needs the usage of fire and the other one needs the usage of putting out fires. Anyways though, we stopped idling in Nesquehoning and made our way down to the Glenanoco rock cut located in the Lehigh Gorge, where 2102 would make her first impression on the rail fans chasing with that loud stack talk thundering through the gorge.
Got that on video. Things. Oh yeah. All right, Chris, Luke, what do we think of the spot? What do we think of the spot?
It was good. I think I like my wide angle.
Oh yeah. Got him moving through the cut, and now it's the foamer run out of here to Middlesburg Road.
Yep. How far is that from here? Is this good?
Great.
Not terribly far.
Middlesburg Road wouldn't be a terribly far drive away, as it only took about 30 minutes to get there, and soon we'd arrive amongst seeing many other rail fans set up at the crossing. We soon realized, however, 2102 was pretty much on our tail, as in the distance you can hear her whistling through Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, amongst us all catching up.
I like the one from 24. Same, bro. It's my favorite one. This is so then this is Andy Moore's classic beach on.
Just that you guys understood.
Since exiting Whitehaven, the train has definitely kicked it up and we're now sailing at track speed. This, however, did limit us on finding a close enough spot, so we opted to set up in Mountaintop, Pennsylvania, under the historic Signal Bridge and past Penobscot Station. Here, 2102 would be taking on water, and sooner than later she'd be pulling up for her service stop. Now the train is temporarily halted, the crew disembarks to replenish the tender with water and do any minor servicing before their descent down to Pittston. However, there's one remaining factor for this descent. 2 diesels you may have seen earlier in the video after we left Glenanoco will be coupled to the front of 2102 to provide dynamic braking down the grade to Pittston. The reason for this being to reduce the wear on the 2102's brake shoes. It is a vintage locomotive, and its brakes would be continuously applied going downhill. Now, I am aware a lot of people aren't a fan of diesel locomotives on the head end of the Iron Horse Rambles consist. However, I quite like the uniqueness, as it's very rare to see one of these fast freight SD50s hauling a Reading and Northern passenger train. And today's lash up provides overall uniqueness for the day. Now, it's widely known by us chasing that the Reading and Northern will supply 2 SD50-2 diesel locomotives for the descent down to Pittston, and that would have been the case today with 5018 and the 5020. However, due to some mechanical failures suffered by the 5020, the Reading and Northern enlisted one of its GP38-2s, number 2015, to substitute on the train. Departing Mountaintop, we start heading down the grade towards Pittston. However, we'd catch the train at one singular spot on their descent, at a place on the railroad known as Laurel's Run. And after that trek down, we've made it to the small city of Pittston, Pennsylvania, where local buses are providing transportation between the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton station and the festivities of the Tomato Festival. Sat here at the siding that we're standing before are 2 of Reading and Northern's SW8 switchers, or more affectionately known as pups, due to their small size. They'd be taking up temporary residence in the Pittston yard after previously working a job in the area the day before. These pups and the diesels that came down with us weren't the only diesel locomotion to be found in the area. Seen here are these two SD50-2s, number 5014 and 5017, which had been working the area that day and were just marshaling themselves out of the way before the eventual Y move of our train. With the SD50s moved out of the way, it would eventually be time for our train to start making some moves. However, while we were in the area, most passengers, rail fans, and even crew members were all catching up from the trip down to Pittston. Eventually, the conductor would walk up to the 2102 in diesels and cut off our diesel power, which would move into the Pittston yard to clear the way, and not long after, they'd be followed by the 2102, pulling the train up on the first leg of the Y procedure. Funny realization was uncovered here, as a good friend of ours had ended up riding the excursion and noted that this was the first time the hooter whistle was actually blown all day. I felt it would be a noteworthy mention to how well Reading and Northern upkeeps their roster of passenger cars to pull off these types of excursions. From what I can see here, looks like they were selling tickets for coach class, crown class, and dome car services, while the rest of the cars on the train being Andy Muller's private cars, and the other car being the Pocono Grill, which is a gift shop / meal car where you can get food and such. Like the Y that we've seen in Jim Thorpe, the train will need to traverse 3 pieces of railroad to turn all the way around. Requiring this, 2102 will shove down 1 piece of track, pull it up on the next piece, and then shove down the 3rd piece, completely turning the train, and facing southbound for the Nesquehoning bound trip. What I like about this Y compared to the Jim Thorpe Y is the amount of diversity that you can get out of your shots. Like for example, we have 2102 passing one of the sitting SD40-2s in the yard. And the following shot sees her laying on her Reading 6 chime at the crossing that serves as the entrance for the station. And I'll explain more about the 3rd angle in a bit, as it has a neat detail that I'd like to touch up on. Midway through the 2nd run, we stopped to do some minor switching to add on an additional car, the Deer Lake, which needed some minor repair work done up in Nesquehoning. So to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, it was thrown on the Iron Horse Rambles consist for transit back to Nesquehoning, and it now made our 13-car train a 14-car train. And so we arrive at our 3rd leg of the Y, and here's something that I wanted to give you all background on from earlier. Now, these types of railroad signals are not commonly seen today. In fact, they are quite vintage, which is the common trend around the Reading and Northern. These are what are known as wigwag signals, which it's pretty obvious how they got their name, as they swing in place to warn traffic not to cross the tracks when a train is approaching. These wigwags would pave the way for the modern-day railroad crossing or grade crossing, and as most of you drivers should know, they're now protected by railroad gates. These ones in particular were found on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, and were soon bought by Andy Muller later in their lives, and now serve the purpose on greeting people who park here at Pittston, and its main purpose for protecting the trains that run through it. After dropping off her consist in the Pittston yard, 2102 would marshal herself back near the entrance to do some minor servicing by the crew, but to also allow some people up into her cab for touring purposes. The way the Pittston yard is set up with its open area gives pretty ample opportunity to marvel at this locomotive depending on where you're at. While wandering the yard on numerous occasions, Chris and I totally didn't express our appreciation and interest in this Reading piece of equipment or anything. After all, it's just another Northern.
We love the hog. This is a great machine right here. The Reading T1.
The benefit of where Pittston is situated is very beneficial to most rail fans, as it's not far off from Steamtown National Historic Site, which is also in the care of a fellow Reading T1. Number 2124. The 2124, alongside a few of her other static counterparts, would be sitting in the Steamtown's yard in preparation for the Railfest weekend, being the following weekend after this one. Those counterparts being the fireless cooker behind the T1 and fellow steam locomotives Canadian Pacific 2317, Railway Valley 15, and Canadian National 3254. These and other static pieces and running equipment would be featured during the grand event, which we would get great coverage of. That will all be explained in that video, so stay tuned for when that drops. For now though, we make our way back to Pittston to find 2102 sat in the station area, boarding before her eventual departure out of Pittston bound for Nesquehoning. To prepare ourselves, we'd move a few miles up the railroad to McAlpine Street in Alvacoa, Pennsylvania, where 2102 would really be getting up to track speed, passing us by the curve and small town area. And so our southbound leg began. We planned to get out of McAlpine Street pretty quick as we had plans to shoot at Laurel Run. However, that didn't work as 2102 went flying by when we got there. So we made an effort to get up to Solomon's Gap to see what we could get, which ended up being a nice going away shot, but that moved into something even cooler, pacing.
Yeah, because then we can pace it coming in. Keep going.
Okay, let's all be for real. Pacing of any kind next to that locomotive is truly living life. Just the raw power the Reading and Northern crews are able to get out of this locomotive, and that expressive sound is just amazing. No video can do that justice, so I highly recommend coming out to see this locomotive if you ever get the chance to or are in the area. However, the 2102 here would be stopping for another water stop before continuing down to Nesquehoning, which would pretty much be a descent other than our final shot, which you'll see in a bit, but for now, enjoy the locomotive coasting down from mountaintop Pennsylvania. The sounds of both steam whistles bounce off the tall peaks of each mountain as 2102 proceeds to thunder over the Y on her final stretch towards Nesquehoning. What should probably be well regarded as the loudest steam locomotive to grace this earth, 2102 brings it home again with another season of Iron Horse Rambles excursions for the Reading and Northern Railroad, with many people from the ride or track side sharing many clips with each other from the day's events. Enjoy this next little bit as Chris, Luke, and I recall the highlights of the day's events walking down the train.
Alright fellas, the day has been wrapped up. How was the chase? Was it epic? But yeah, now we're leaving the Reading and Northern.
Well, at least we got pacing.
Oh yeah, we got the pacing shot. We got all the hill shots, you know, stack talk. Who's this? Oh, 2013 with one of the coach shit. There was a train going by at 2102.
Wait, who told you that?
No. I remember I guessed it and I said, how funny would it? Yeah, how funny would it be if we left and then the train went by?
You think it's a,
That's Andy's private cars. Oh!
probably taking that before.
That is so funny. Yeah, so Andy was like, okay, back to Port Clinton we go. By steam train. Hey, Andy Moore, if you're watching this, you are a funny and cool guy. Yeah, I appreciate this ramble here, dude.
Wrapping off the night, SD50 number 5018 would couple onto the remaining half of the consist and prepare to tow it down the hill to Jim Thorpe.
I'm gonna stand right here if that's okay.
Oh yeah, of course.
Our final shots of the night would include seeing the 5018 and 2102 off out of Nesquehoning, both sounding off their horns and whistles respectively, calling out into the night. The 5018 would be tasked with heading back down to the Jim Thorpe Y and turning the consist before eventually towing this whole cavalcade back to Port Clinton, Pennsylvania to tie down the coaches and return 2102 to the steam shops.
Well, that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Special thanks to Chris, his brother, and his father for having me out here today. Really love chasing with them. Probably one of the best chases I've had this year. I'm not going to lie. Special thanks to the Reading and Northern Steam crews, and shout out to everybody that we saw out here. So with that being said, I'll see you on the next video. Thank you so much for watching.